Frank, man, hey, how's it going today?
Hey, good. Armin, what's up?
Hey, have you ever heard of Mike Mentzer?
No, who's that?
He's the king of heavy duty, high intensity training. So we're going to talk about him on the show today. It's going to be a great one, Frank.
Oh, look forward to it. Awesome.
Hey, and welcome to the NSP Nutrition Show. I'm Arman Eckelbarger.
And I am Frank Mills, and we have a great show for you today. Today, Armin and I will be talking about experience, Armin's experience doing high intensity training and the Mike Mentzer way, as we discussed at the beginning, and the benefits of, boy, I knew I was going to wreck that,
Yeah,
of cruciferous vegetables. Sorry about that,
nice.
everybody. But anyway, let's get started. Armin, Mike Mentzer, the name kind of sounded familiar, but I really didn't know who he was, to be honest with you. So tell us about this experience that you have of high intensity training in the Mike Mentzer way.
Okay. Well, let me just touch base on who Mike is. He was a,
Okay.
a famous bodybuilder. Unfortunately, he didn't live too long,
Hmm.
but he did make some unique, um, what I would call good things happen when it comes to training.
Okay.
Um, but he was born November 15th, 1951. He died June 10th, 2001. He was an IFBB pro professional bodybuilder. He also a businessman and author. He was very into philosophy as
Mm-hmm.
well. So he's a fairly intelligent guy. And so when we talk about him, you'll kind of get a little bit more reasoning behind why I decided to try some of his concepts. But
Mm-hmm.
the other thing about him is he started bodybuilding at the age of 12, a very young
Wow.
age. And then he started competing at the age of
Mm-hmm.
18. Then he eventually uh, won the Mr. America title in 1976, and then he won the Mr. Universe in 1978. And when he did that in 1978, this is another thing he was known for,
Mm-hmm.
is he was the first ever competitor to get a 300 perfect score. No
Oh,
other
wow.
bodybuilder
Huh.
had ever done that. So
Okay.
he was really making things happen. And then on that, he turned pro, basically turned pro in 1979. After he got his Mr. Universe, he started competing in the pro level. So in
Okay.
1979, he actually won the Mr. Olympia heavyweight class. They had two classes back then. So he actually won the Olympia to some degree, but he lost the overall. And he also had a perfect score when he won the heavyweight of the Mr. Olympia in the
Okay.
heavyweight class
Mm-hmm.
and with that perfect score there, but he lost the overall to Frank Zane. Frank Zane won in 1977, 78, and 79.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so then he had big plans for 1980, and that's when things kind of started falling apart for him because that's when Arnold decided to make his comeback in Sydney,
Oh.
Australia, and Mike ended up getting fifth. And he was just so frustrated because the way Arnold was allowed to enter the show at the last minute and all these
Mm-hmm.
different things, he just felt that you shouldn't be able to do that. They wouldn't normally let other people do that. So he felt it was rigged, and his attitude really went south after that as far as
Mm-hmm.
competing. So he just retired.
So by you being experienced as you are and you kind of gravitated toward the Mike Mentzer way, what made Mike different um, from other competing bodybuilders back in that time?
Well, Mike, again, was a pretty smart guy. He was always looking for answers and he wanted to win. And so he's looking at all the different things that are
Mm-hmm.
available. And initially, with all the training he had done, he was doing the typical volume training. So you'd be training in 2 hours or sometimes more than that
Right.
in the gym. Um, so as he was doing that, he was also competing. And then he lost a competition early on in his 20s to a guy named Casey Viator, and he
Okay.
was really impressed by this guy. This guy was, really, really big, very thick muscled, and so he got to know him. And Casey had mentioned that he had been working with Arthur Jones, and Arthur Jones was the creator of Niles at the time.
Oh,
And
wow.
so
Okay.
what happened was Casey eventually introduced Mike to Arthur, and they hit it off. So then Mike was kind of excited to learn how Casey had built his physique and started learning the techniques that Arthur had been training Casey Viator on. And so some of the things that Arthur Jones was known for is you do one set to muscular failure. You would do really controlled repetitions. So, emphasizing the negative, the stretch, the positive, the static hold, really
Okay.
increasing intensity as much as possible to reach a higher level of development. And so that was basically these things made a lot of sense to Mike. And so he started getting involved with that. So
Mm-hmm.
as he learned under Jones, he was really figuring these things out. He liked what was happening for him. But at the same time, as he kept training as he kept working with Arthur Jones, he kind of fell out of favor in the sense that he didn't feel like Arthur Jones was doing everything he could be doing the way he said he was doing it. So
Right.
there were some
Right.
things there that kind of bothered him. So that was, he decided to part ways at that point.
Gotcha. Interesting. So for that point and for that information you're telling us, it seems like Mike very hungry for information
Oh
and
yeah.
really was on a quest, right? So what happened after that?
Well, so Mike kept learning and experimenting with these different techniques, and
Mm-hmm.
so and then because Arthur he didn't feel was fully utilizing all of his principles that he talked about, Mike decided to take it further on his own and that's when he decided to create the high intensity training program, which he called at the time was called heavy duty training, and just started doing his own methodology regarding these techniques.
So what made you, well, actually, what made Mike decide to try this kind of training? I mean, how did that attract him?
Well, Mike he was looking for efficiency.
Uh-huh.
Uh, so with that, he wanted to find out, is there a better way to get more muscular growth versus just doing all the volume? Because, the volume is very hard on you and it affects your
Mm-hmm.
recovery. So
Right.
he's looking
Right.
for a better technique. So that was
Interesting.
one of the things there.
All right. So I'm kind of curious, what happened when you tried and you actually implemented this into your training program?
Well, let me just step back for a second and then
Uh-huh.
kind of let me explain why I decided to try this
Okay.
training strategy. So in my situation, I was doing the typical 3 sets to 10, 12, and just do different exercises, different combinations, but they're mostly straight sets. I do some supersets as well, but I wasn't, it was just I was finding my training was getting really stale,
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't getting much results either on top of that. And when it gets stale and you don't see results, you start to wonder, okay, why am I doing this?
Mm-hmm.
So I was looking for something, more unique, but also I was raising a family. I got kids, I got work, I got all these things going on. I was looking for more efficiency as well. And so I started researching, bought the book, started researching and read it and decided, all right, I'm going to give this a try because my recovery wasn't good from the
Mm-hmm.
workouts that I was doing. I was getting sick a lot and I just didn't understand why all this was happening. And I thought, let me just try something else totally different because everything else I was reading was kind of the same kind of stuff, just maybe change it a little bit here, a little bit there.
Mm-hmm.
But I was also really curious about the intensity factor because I felt like I was training pretty intense.
Mm-hmm. All right, Armin. So what happened when you did it?
Okay, so this was quite a process because I'm going to do something totally different I've never done before, and I got
Mm-hmm.
to do one set to failure, is what Mike was saying. He would say no more than 2 sets, so he did have one exception, but it's one set to failure, no more than 2 sets with that particular exercise. So I'm trying to figure out, well, how is this going to work?
Right.
Because you're used to
Right.
doing volume. And I decided, all right, so I got to figure out how to increase that intensity so I get something out of this. So I kept reading the book, and then I would go in the gym and just do the routines that were in the book and try to emulate those as much as possible and try to figure out how I can keep pushing myself to really stimulate as much muscle fiber as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found is, because with Mike's system, you have to do it a particular way. So, but what I found is every week I was getting a little bit more, a little stronger. And then I had good recovery. And I could tell there was a difference going on with what I was doing. So I kept doing this. I did it for like almost 5 years, and was pretty surprised by how well I recovered, how I was doing. I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
planning on competing or anything. I just wanted a different way to train so that I had more energy to help take care of my family, get
Mm-hmm.
work done, and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of what happened to me when I started doing it at that point.
And so how long did you do it, Arman?
I did it for basically about 5 years, and so
Oh, wow.
I kind of still do it to some degree, but I have modified it just because of things I've noticed as well, and also continue to experiment, especially when you're comparing a Mike Mentzer training style to a Vince Gironda training style. And
Right. Right.
what I've kind of done is meshed them together, and
Hmm.
we'll kind of touch on that.
Okay. So I'm kind of curious, what do you think, or maybe what would you say are the key takeaways from this style of training? I mean, for 5 years, that's a long time.
So, you know, the main thing is I was in the gym 15, maybe at the most 30 minutes, and I'm out of there. And
Oh,
then I was
wow.
focused on recovery. And because Mike has a really long dissertation about recovery. So, like when we talk about recovery, Mike was all about recovery
Mm-hmm.
because without it, he didn't feel like you're going to get the gains anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So, what you have to understand though is what builds muscle, what I kind of figured out by doing this is intensity. So you got to stimulate, you got to make the body have to adapt to a certain level of stress. And so the higher the intensity, the more the body seems to respond to that. But there's a point of diminishing returns. So in other words, Mike in himself would use the term, you can't sprint a marathon. Okay, well,
Mm-hmm.
that just makes sense. So there's a certain point of diminishing returns, and that's what he was really getting at.
Okay.
So when it came to developing intensity, what I got out of that was he went into pre-exhaust work, which was perfect for what I was trying to do because my chest was really weak and I was strong, but my chest was really weak. And by doing pre-exhaust work, I learned how to bring out my chest much better. And I learned how to bring out the weaker muscle groups by doing the pre-exhaust work,
Mm-hmm.
slowing the tempo down, and really challenging yourself to get through a slow repetition and pause and then press. It it was it was it was a really stimulating situation, but it was
Mm-hmm.
also intimidating on what you're trying to do because you already know what's going to happen when you start to do it a second time.
Right.
And then
Right.
his warm up sets are on. A lot of guys what they do is they warm up and they just keep they after they warm up a little bit, then they just keep adding weight and they keep adding weight and see how many reps they can get.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Mike's approach was, why are you doing that? Why you keep adding more weight? You're adding heavier weight and you're burning all the glucose off before you even get to the heavy weight. So why don't you save your glucose, your energy for the heavy stuff? Just do some small warm-ups. And this is what powerlifters do. They'll
Mm-hmm.
do a set of 2 or 3 reps, and then they'll keep adding weight, set of 2 or 3 reps, and then they finally hit that work set. Well, this is what happens here. You hit that work set, and you give it all you got, and it's all out.
Mm-hmm.
So you keep focusing on how you can increase the intensity, and then you get to those work sets, you give it all you got, and then the other thing that was important is you had to track every workout. So you had to write down everything, which I didn't do for a long time. I kind of got out of that. Well, he's like, you got to measure what's happening to see if you're improving. And if not, something's not working. You're not getting enough rest. You're not getting enough food. You got a lot of stress going on. You're not getting
Mm-hmm.
enough sleep, that kind of stuff, which was true because
Right.
I figured that out as well as some workouts weren't as good. And I looked back and what happened. And yeah, I didn't get enough sleep that day,
Hmm.
or I was under tremendous amount of stress. And so my energy wasn't good either going into the workout.
Right.
So, I was able to kind of figure that out. So, got better recovery. Then the other thing I found was because I'm lifting heavier weight, which I lifted some really good weight. I mean, I was close grip benching 300 pounds for reps, like, 8 reps,
Mm-hmm.
close grip. So that's pretty good. And squatting, 455 for like 12 to 15 reps, etc. You get better muscle thickness is what I found with the heavy stuff because you're stimulating the fast twitch white muscle fiber. So that was
Okay.
the other takeaway. Kind of a
Interesting.
long dissertation there.
No, no, that's really good information. Now, you had mentioned that you had trained that way for 5 years, but you've kind of altered it and combined it. What made you kind of change things up after 5 years and kind of alter it?
So as I was just doing that, I liked that training, but I
Hmm.
was also still searching for their answers. And then I got back into, I was looking for supplements and then come across Vince's stuff. And I forgot all
Ah.
about Vince's training ideas. And so I was like, well, Vince got good results too.
Hmm.
But when I was reading a lot of Vince's material, two things came together on this. Keep the workout short. And so Vince was, you shouldn't need more than 45 minutes of consistent training, and then you should
Right.
take a break and rest.
Okay.
Now, Vince was open to doing 2 workouts a day and that kind of thing, but that again was all based on recovery. So,
Hmm.
what I was getting here is the sweet spot of intensity is up to about 45 minutes of giving it all you got. Then you let the body stop, rest, and recover as much as you can so you'll be as fresh as you need to be for the next training session. So, which was also favorable to keep my schedule really simple. I didn't have to think I got to go train for an hour and I got to take a
Right.
shower and I got to do all these things. It makes it more easier to stay consistent by knowing it's only going to be 45 minutes. I just got to work really hard, get in and out. So that was kind of like one of the things I felt was a win by combining both the strategies. Because with Vince's, the strategy was trained at a really fast pace. With
Hmm.
Mike, it was trained a little slower pace, but all out for that one set.
Well, you've obviously been doing a lot of training and a lot of different types for a long time. And
Yeah.
um, I'm curious, what kind of advice would you have for somebody who's trying to consider the Mike Mentzer way type of training?
All right. So, in my opinion, based on how I learned everything, I'd buy the book if you really
Hmm.
want to get, the exact structure, because
Right.
he has detailed routines in there that they're pretty simple.
Hmm.
But you need to track everything you're doing to measure your progress. So whether you track it on an app or you write it down, you put on a spreadsheet, whatever, that's going to be important because then you can go back and understand what's working and not working. Um, and that keeps you motivated. So that was another
Right.
thing that was kind of important to me. I was just surprised how much stronger I was getting week after week because the goal was each and every workout, try to get one more rep,
Hmm.
or if I got to my rep max, then I was going to add weight and make sure I get that minimum of 6 with the heavier weight. So I was adding weight pretty progressively, which was really cool. Other things to do would be you got to understand your volume of training is going to drop.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
if you do a high volume, so that's something to keep in mind. But that can be a good thing. It can be good for recovery, and you may need to do some lower volume just to let everything kind of clear up with the central nervous system and things like that. And then the warm ups. You know, a lot of guys they do so many warm up sets or so many progressive overload sets that by the time they get to the heavy stuff that they really want to work with, they
Hmm.
don't have the glucose anymore because they used it up on the other sets, and that is a big difference there. So like
Hmm.
when I after I warm up, I go right to the main weight. I know what weight I'm going to use and I'm tracking it, and I'm going to see okay what can I get with this today. So it's a different mindset when it comes to determining what you're going to do for that workout. And it challenges you because you're like, okay, how am I going to get one more rep? So then
Hmm.
you start learning about forced reps. You start learning about other pre-exhaust options. You start learning about having somebody to assist you to get some partial reps.
Hmm.
So you take things to a different level, but you're doing it in a safe, manageable way. But what it also happens is with these higher tech intensity techniques is you're going to it stimulates more muscle growth. And
Right. Right.
I was seeing stuff starting to happen that I hadn't seen in a long time.
Hmm.
Then on top
Well,
of that, the
hmm,
recovery. Go
okay.
ahead, you had a question?
No, no, I was just kind of curious when you were talking about all those different things. I That was my next question is what about the recovery because he was so focused on recovery, right?
Yeah, so in some respects, I think his recovery was too much,
Hmm.
but he was at a different level, and again, he was probably on drugs, you know, gear as they call it,
Hmm.
which I'm not doing.
Right.
So I felt like my recovery got improved, but then as I learned my recovery, which is another takeaway for me, then I knew when I could up my game some more. So that's another
Oh,
thing, making sure you get
okay.
enough food, make sure you get enough rest, sleep, and keep the stress down and stuff like that. So yeah, it was a excellent way to learn how to manage my recovery.
And so, what about the long-term effects, Armin, from this type of training? How does that work?
Okay, so it's it's got some really good benefits to it, but at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the day, over a period of time, again, I was doing it for almost 5 years. I was getting up to some pretty heavy weight,
Mm-hmm.
and Mike's rep scheme for like upper body is 6 to 10 reps, period, and the lower body is 12 to 20, and there wasn't a lot of change on that.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're using maximum weight with that kind of rep scheme, it will tend to start to affect your joints over time. So that was one of the things that I think
Mm-hmm.
kind of initiated some of the joint issues. And that's when I realized I got to kind of cut things back. I can still go heavy,
Right,
but I got to
right.
cut things back and then still offset that with maybe some additional sets just to kind of, again, push as much blood to the muscles possible.
Hmm. Very interesting. How do you think the training worked for you, Armin?
Well, I liked it because it was different. I was learning a lot as I was learning a lot about my body, which
Mm-hmm.
was more so than what I was doing from the other. And then, it could be different reasons for that. I was just more focused because I was learning and it was so unique. And I
Mm-hmm.
really want to understand, how do you push yourself to stimulate enough muscle to make it work? And it did work. Now, I wouldn't say it put a ton of muscle on me, but it made my muscle thickness very good. And that
Okay.
muscle density is important because when you lean out, that's when you see how much true muscle you have. So that's what I got out of that. But the other thing is I learned how to do isolation work to make my weaker body parts better. So,
Okay.
we talk about the pre-exhaust. My weak body part was my chest, and then also my lats weren't as good. So I learned about doing pullovers, and you superset that with pull-ups, and that really helps it helped my lat width.
Mm-hmm.
Doing fly work before I do presses really helped my pecs to develop much more evenly. And the same thing with doing lateral raises before you do shoulder presses, leg extensions before you do squats or leg presses. You know, there's just different things that he did when you
Mm-hmm.
pre-exhaust. It stimulates a lot more muscle fiber. And, he would do rest pause uh, sets too, where, you do as many as you can, then you'd rest for 20, 30 seconds and try to squeeze out a couple more reps. Again, you're going to failure. So that was
Mm-hmm.
the thing. Do you get to the point where you couldn't even hardly move the weight? So learning this stuff was a little bit of a journey, and
Mm-hmm.
you kind of have to have a spotter on some of it too. So that's the other thing. But I did have that. Fortunately for me, I had somebody who could spot me,
Mm-hmm.
or I'd get somebody and explain to them what I'm going to do. So I thought it was a good experience for me, pure and simple. But I've kind of combined things at this point in time in my career.
Well, when somebody's going to watch this show or actually listen to the podcast, they're going to hear this. And of course, you're going to go and explore the Mike Mentzer way and you're going to get into it. But just kind of curious, is this something that you would recommend, this style of training?
So that's a really good question. So, because I don't do it the same as I did, but
Mm-hmm.
I would say yes, I would at least experiment with it for a month or a couple months and see how you respond to it. But just understand you're not going to be doing the volume, but
Right.
you're learning how to maximize intensity. And so once I learned that, and then I added some volume, then I was able to package it in a way so my recovery was still good, and
Mm-hmm.
then I was able to improve my muscle size better with using both techniques, and then also using the different exercise combinations to bring up the weak body parts, which is what you have to do if you want to be at a competitive level or you want to look
Mm-hmm.
really good. You want to make sure everything's well balanced, and that's what I wanted to do. So I thought it was very beneficial. So I do think it's a good thing to try. But at the end of the day, as you learn it, you'll be able to change your training so that you always have that intensity,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the hard part to learn is intensity. How to push yourself
Mm-hmm.
to the point of muscular failure and safely as well.
Right. Right. Well, you know, A lot of people can take it out for a test drive. If you're looking to change up your workout or something like that for a short time, or who knows, you may like it, want to implement it for a longer time, like Armin did, 5 years. Who knows? But
Yeah.
so it's worth at least taking a chance and going out and trying something different, then, right?
Yeah, especially if you have a tight schedule and
Mm-hmm.
time and you don't have much time. I think it's a great approach because that's how it worked for me because it's raising kids and working in the business and stuff, and you got to allocate your time as best you can, but I still wanted to train.
Absolutely. Well, Armin, some great information about Mike Mentzer and his way of training. Um, Armin, we got some exciting news for the people who watch and listen to our show. I don't know if anybody knows this, but if you go to the NSP Nutrition website, nspnutrition.com, and if you look on the toolbar going across the top, you will now see an added category for the NSP Nutrition Show. It has direct links to YouTube and our podcast hosting site. But Armin,
Mhm.
I've got even more good news as well. Are you ready?
Oh yeah.
All right. So we've got the podcast is now available on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, among many of your other favorite podcast apps. So if you don't have time to watch us on YouTube, you can now listen on your favorite podcast app. Just go
Yeah.
ahead and search NSP Nutrition Show, subscribe, like, share it with your friends and family, add it to your list of favorites, and you can check us out weekly with the show. So we knew it would take a little time, but and really shortly we'll be adding those links onto the website as well, so you can have easy access as well. But pretty exciting news, huh, Armin?
Yeah. I mean, it's awesome. So now we have more, yeah, get more access to it and let other people know. Sure.
Absolutely. Well, Armin and I, we're going to take a quick break, and we appreciate you joining us today. When we come back, we're going to be talking about vegetables, cruciferous vegetables to be 100%. But we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Hey, welcome back to the NSP Nutrition Show. I'm Arman Eckelbarger.
And I'm Frank Mills. And of course, we're going to talk about the benefits of cruciferous vegetables. Boy, I wrecked it again. That's a tough one. Um, you know,
Cruciferous, man.
we all grew up at the dinner table having to eat our cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, that kind of stuff. You see it in movies a lot, but maybe you could explain what are cruciferous vegetables.
All right. Well, what they are, they're part of the Brassica genus of plants. And
Okay.
so what you're going to find with these is like that classify as cruciferous. There's a lot of them. Okay, but we're just going to highlight a couple of key ones. We're going to arugula, bok choy, broccoli, Brussels
Hmm.
sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, collard greens, kale, and garden cress, etc. So there's about 3,000 different cruciferous species.
Hmm.
So there's a lot, but at the end of the day, what they are, they're thick, fibrous vegetables as well. So they have a high amount of fiber and some other good properties, which we're going to talk about.
That's funny. I wouldn't have put cauliflower on my list if I had to name them. So that's pretty interesting. Is there a reason why they're named cruciferous?
Yeah, I was kind of curious about that too. So
Uh-huh.
I guess it's because of their four-petaled flowers that looks like a crucifer or a cross. There's the cross type shape to it.
Huh.
Um, when you
Okay.
look at them, like colored mustard greens as an example,
Mm-hmm.
that or like the bottom of a cauliflower, you got the big stumps on the bottom side.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Right.
how they back a long time ago they call them cruciferous.
All right. So what are the benefits of eating these vegetables? Because we hear that they're good for you. That's for sure.
Well, they're high in vitamins and minerals, especially folate, vitamin K, which vitamin K is something that people need a lot of to help push the calcium into the bones, but vitamin K2 especially for that.
Mm-hmm.
And as you have your dark green versions of it, so those are higher in vitamin A and vitamin C, and so you got some phytonutrients that come with it. And then there's different compounds which really help fight inflammation. And so when you're doing that, then it helps reduce the risk of developing cancer and other damaged cells. So
Okay.
it has a really good feature to that. Other than that, they also have a decent amount of protein. Of course, it's plant protein. Again, like I mentioned, high in fiber, along with the vitamins and minerals. So,
Well, a lot of people think that eating vegetables is good for you, and they are, but are cruciferous vegetables are they good for everybody?
all right, well, that's a good question. So, what you need to know about eating cruciferous vegetables, especially if you eat a lot of them, is if you have a thyroid disorder. Like for me, I have a thyroid condition, so I take Armor for that. And so, cruciferous vegetables can get in the way of your iodine absorption.
Ah,
So that's, which like broccoli, the cauliflower, the Brussels sprouts, kale. So what they're seeing is they feel like it interferes with your iodine absorption. So one of the things which that's important because you need a good operating
right.
thyroid for good metabolism, burn energy, keep your body temperature up, etc. So what you want to do, and what I had figured out is, I'm on thyroid medication, but I take the iodine to offset that. So that's
Mm-hmm.
another benefit of taking iodine, the NSP and IKI tabs.
Okay. Okay. Well, what are some of the health benefits of eating cruciferous vegetables? Because there's got to be a lot, right?
Well, I'm gonna have a try to pronounce this word, but they contain what's called glucosinolates. Okay,
Okay.
glucosinolates. I think that's how you say it. And these are compounds, and they come from the dark green plants. What that does, it gives them that bitter flavor. So what these do is they have a strong anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties. So it helps protect the cells from disease-causing damage because cells over time, they start to slowly die off, and so this is one of the protective things that you can eat to help
Okay.
that from having that cell be start to replicate and become a cancerous type cell because that's typically what happens. So they've been shown to kill cancer cells and stop any kind of tumor growth. So
Okay.
they're applied in different medical therapies as well.
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing hormone therapy and things like that. The nutritional content is also associated with low risk of you know chronic chronic disease like diabetes,
Mm-hmm.
asthma, and even Alzheimer's. So what they're seeing with it, it's a good thing to have it in the mix. And then the antimicro microbial
Okay.
antimicrobial. I can't say it very well. Struggling on that, but these antimicrobial properties they give your immune defenses a good boost so that you can get rid of pathogens as they hit your system. So when you're eating them, it helps keep that immune system in the gut, keep that flora up to help keep things working at a high level to get rid of anything that the body doesn't need, especially any kind of thing that's going to cause a sickness or illness, these pathogens. So it has a cleansing effect for that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I am kind of curious because there's a lot of different ways that you can prepare a vegetable. Is
Yeah.
there a specific way that you would recommend, or is there a right way, I guess?
Well, that's kind of a loaded gun too. You're gonna have a lot of different opinions, but some of the research says that if you steam the vegetables, it's better because you're going to
Okay.
retain more of the nutritional value versus if you boil them, you tend to boil out some of the nutrients, and then when you get rid of the water, you lose those nutrients. So
Right.
steaming them is good, but microwaving is not bad either. A little bit of water, you can microwave them, stir frying and sautéing. Those are other ways you can do it. And at the end of the day, you can just rinse them off and eat them raw.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
you
Right.
have those flexibilities, but there you're going to get more nutrient absorption by doing those methods we just talked about. But I got to tell you, I like it when my wife takes and puts them in the oven and roasts them with some herbs and like coconut oil or extra light olive oil. Put it in the
Mm-hmm.
oven because that cooks them and makes them nice and crunchy. And they taste really good, and that's another great way to eat them as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the taste because on mine, I like the organic grass-fed butter and salt is what I have
Oh
on
yeah,
mine. So what
well, I like
about the
that too.
taste? Is there other options to
Well,
flavor it up?
that's the thing. They have that bitter taste. So but I've seen people make Brussels sprouts and they cook them with the oil and the bacon. They bake them, put a little bit of bacon on them to flavor them up. So that's another strategy. Put the grass-fed butter on them. I like that too. I mean, it makes them taste great. So
Mm-hmm.
you can use ranch dressing, blue cheese, dips, or you can use olive oil. So there's just different things you can kind of try to enhance the taste, but it's kind of an acquired taste as well. So,
Yeah.
the more you eat them, the less of a big deal it is. So that, you have to just be creative. There's a lot of creative ways to make them, but for this conversation, I don't know if anybody we're dealing with is really looking for a chef on this preparation. Probably are, but
Yeah.
we're not that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you don't want to do what like my sister used to do. She used to take Velveeta and pour over the broccoli. So no, you
Yeah,
don't
well,
want to
that's
do stuff like that.
broccoli cheese. Yeah, now you can use broccoli cheese; it's not bad. I mean, if I
Just
do
not
that, though,
Velveeta.
yeah, don't do
Right.
Velveeta. That's just processed grease.
Right.
Well,
Right.
it's not going to absorb well. Let's put it that way. So,
All right. So Armin, what has been your experience with the cruciferous vegetables? Boy, I'm wrecking it every time.
well, it's not a simple word, but I recommend them. I like to eat them.
Uh-huh.
I do have a thyroid condition, so I take the iodine, so I can
Mm-hmm.
offset that. But again, they're good in fiber, and you have cancer suppressing properties from them because they do
Yeah.
extract these different cruciferous vegetables, and well, on top of that, they're good for suppressing estrogen for men
Mm-hmm.
and helping that with females as well. So that's another thing that they're also good at. So you have different ways you can take them as far as medicinally and then also for food,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't go wrong with putting them in your diet. And I guess that's the main thing we're trying to say here. It's good to
Yeah.
help get rid of damaged cells, help keep it from getting cancer and tumors, and then incorporate it for the other benefits that you get from the nutrients.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a lot of people they think that they don't have time for the preparation of proper nutrition, and it all comes down to planning. But in regards to the supplementation, NSP has some great iodine tabs, and we both take them, and
Yeah.
they are fantastic. So yeah, I highly recommend those for anybody watching the show. Well, Armin, great information, man, as usual. You always seem to bring some great content to the show, and I'm sure it's much appreciated by everyone watching and listening.
Oh, no problem. Looking forward to doing it again next week. But, the people who are listening, give us some additional ideas, other topics you'd like for us to cover, because that's what we're here for, and try to keep it real informative and you get as much takeaway and value as you can from the show.
Absolutely. And if you have any comments or suggestions or topics for the show that you'd like us to cover, you can comment on the YouTube channel, or you can also contact nspnutrition.com. The email is support@nspnutrition.com, and just put in the topic line NSP Nutrition Show, and they'll make sure that we get the question or the comment. And who knows, maybe your idea will be the whole format of next week's show. You never know, right, Armin?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's what we're looking for is, what people want to hear. We have
Absolutely.
we got our own agenda, but I mean, just with things that we think people want to hear. But if you have something else that's important, probably other people are just as concerned about it or like to learn more as well. So yeah, we're very open to all that.
And the most important thing is if you like the show, if you enjoy it, share it with a friend, a family member.
Yeah.
We would appreciate that very much. And, all the information is right there on the NSP Nutrition Show page now. And if you like this show and if you're looking for more, an in general nutrition type of a format, a fitness format, Armin and I, all the links are for Frank Mills Reality Fitness. It's on the NSP Nutrition Show page now.
Yeah.
And all the links are there to check that out as well. And if you like that, hey, check it out and see what happens. But Armin, another great show. And, we look forward to everyone joining us next week for another NSP Nutrition Show.
Hey, thanks for checking out the NSP Show. Go to nspnutrition.com where you can find a whole heap of resources to help you achieve stunning definition and eye-popping levels of muscularity. Don't forget you can save 10% on your first order by using the code NSP Show at the checkout. Catch you next time.